All right, how's it going, people? Today is 12/29/2016. It'll be 2017 in 3 days. And I just want to do a hangout today. I just felt like it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and post the links up. Hold on. I'm gonna start talking about some news articles here in a minute. Okay. Okay, the link is posted. Invite some people. Okay. All right. All right, hold on a second. I'll be right back. Okay, hold on a second. All right. All right, now this is from Yahoo.com. Former Bills Falcons safety Keon Carpenter dies at 39 after accident on family vacation. Yeah, this seems interesting. For those of you who are football fans, I'm a football fan myself. Keon Carpenter during a 2005 game, Getty Images. All right, safety Keon Carpenter, who spent 7 seasons with the Buffalo Bills and Atlanta Falcons, died on Thursday morning at a hospital in Miami. He was 39. Carpenter was on vacation with his family in South Florida when he fell while playing with his son. A cousin, Jamelia Smith, told the Baltimore Sun. They were running to the car when Carpenter slipped, fell, hit his head, and slipped into a coma. It was just a freak accident. He was always healthy. He went to the doctor, ate well, and worked out. Listed at 5'11", 205 pounds. Carpenter entered the league in 1999 with the Bills as an undrafted rookie out of Virginia Tech. He played 3 seasons with Buffalo, playing in 37 games and starting 22 in his second and third seasons with the team. Buffalo traded Carpenter to Atlanta in 2002. Okay. He spent 4 years with the Falcons, starting 39 and 46 games. Carpenter missed the entire 2004 season due to a torn ACL, but to return the next year to start 15 games. It would be his final NFL season. In all, Carpenter played 83 games, 61 starts with 14 interceptions. One of them returned for a touchdown and 188 total tackles. Right. A Baltimore native, Carpenter was both the quarterback and star safety at Woodlawn High, known for his 4.4-second speed in the 40-yard dash, and was also a standout basketball player. All right. Virginia Tech, Carpenter was a special teams phenom, blocking a school record 6 punts, his final one coming in his last game with the team, the 1998 Music City Bowl. In a statement, former Virginia Tech coach Frank Beamer said of Carpenter, Cheryl and I were saddened to learn of the passing of Keon Carpenter. Keon was one of the rocks around which we built our program at Virginia Tech in the 1990s. He was a tenacious punt blocker and a relentless player on defense. More importantly, he had a heart of gold. His work with the Carpenter House and other charitable organizations to help those in need truly embodied the Virginia Tech spirit. Our condolences to Keon's family and the loss of a great Hokie. After retiring from the NFL, Carpenter founded the Carpenter House in Baltimore, according to the foundation's website. Among its goals were to support the development of healthy homes and environments for low-income children to thrive and reach their highest potential for academic success. Our goal is to invest in, build, and inspire communities of change. All right. One of the programs at the Carpenter House is Shutdown Academy, which combines classroom instruction with football and cheerleading instruction. Carpenter founded Shutdown Academy with Aaron Maben and Brian Johnson, 2 other Baltimore natives who went on to the NFL. Carpenter survived by his wife, Tanya, and 4 children. All right, let's look at some of the comments. All right, here's this guy. Mr. Sean says, man, here 1 minute, the next you're gone. My sympathies go out to the family and the children who witnessed it. All right. Peter says, well, this is a sad story. A guy who worked hard made a positive difference with his life, and I feel sad for his family and son. Best to the family. All right. Hillary S., a rep for a man who exhibits generosity and spending time with his family. All right. Dave, if a white man fell and hit his head like that, the media wouldn't even care. Wow. That's interesting comment there. All right. Lands and grows. 2016 has been an undeniably tragic year across the board. My sympathies to his family, especially his children. Okay. Hold on a second. Let's see if we can get someone else in here. I just put a link, gave a link to somebody to see if they'll pop in. I invited a few more people. I'm gonna take a quick break. How's it going, Christopher?
Hey.
All right, how's it going, man? I'm just going over some news stories here. Discussing them. It's just an open discussion type hangout. I was trying to get going.
What kind of news stories?
All types of news.
Like the biggest news stories I've heard is George Michael dying, Carrie Fisher and her mother dying.
Oh yeah, the one who played Princess Leia, right?
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Let's talk about that. Let me look her up really fast because I wanted to talk about that as well. Carrie Fisher death. Okay, hold on. She was a nice looking woman too. Let me go ahead and All right, this is from USAtoday.com. All right, Carrie Fisher's death. All right, what we know now. Okay. Let me go ahead and mute this. All right. A day after Carrie Fisher's shocking death, her mother, Hollywood legend Debbie Reynolds, has died. Okay, wow. TMZ said that early on Wednesday, Reynolds, 84, was at son Todd Fisher's home when she had a medical emergency and was rushed to a nearby hospital. Reynolds and Todd were planning funeral arrangements for Carrie, who was 60 when she died. She was young when she died, man. Tuesday, 4 days after she suffered her own medical emergency on a flight from London to Los Angeles. At 60 years old, that is young. That's not old at all. But all right, let's continue. She's now with Carrie, and we're all heartbroken, Todd said from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He said the stress of his sister's death was too much for Reynolds. The latest, Debbie Reynolds dies at 84. Okay, funeral plans are all right. Yeah, so she died very young. And I'm surprised by that. I wonder what could have caused that. Because I mean, people usually live longer these days. They live until about 75, or it's a little bit older for women. But the fact that it's probably a little bit too early to speculate, but there's probably bound to be conspiracies surrounding this. All right, so here's this is from Reddit.com. Okay. Didn't and this guy's name is Ragnavok. Okay, from Reddit. Didn't she come out a few months ago saying she was going to release a book talking about her affair with Harrison Ford during the filming of Star Wars? I mean, Harrison Ford is a powerful dude, and he certainly would not want that book released. It would look bad for him, and she probably had dirt on some other people that would have been released. Just weird how she dies so soon after that. What are your thoughts on that? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I've only just arrived, so I didn't hear what you said.
We're talking about Carrie Fisher's death, whether or not it was some sort of conspiracy.
Oh, hey, Cliff Jumper.
There is no conspiracy. I think people just create ideas, and that's that.
But supposedly she was going to write a book on her affair with Harrison Ford and some
I
possibly
believe she's already written the book.
she has.
Yeah, so what difference would it make? You know, the information's already out. You think he had her killed?
Yeah, that's kind of what. That's not my opinion, but I mean, Patriarch, I don't know your opinion. Like, do you think that like Harrison Ford, went on the deep web and kind of hired an assassin or something?
I don't know, but it's just weird that she's dead at 60 years old. 60 years old is young.
Yeah, but she's got a history of drugs and alcohol.
Oh, really?
That can mess up your body, you know. Um, you know, I've got a cousin that is 6 months older than I am. Okay, and you know, she did lots of drugs, and she looks 15 to 20 years older than I do. She looks old because of the effect of drugs on her body.
Yeah, I know drugs can take a big toll on people. But it kind of makes it like I didn't even know she was into drugs. I mean, I know a lot of people in Hollywood are involved with drugs. I didn't know she personally was into drugs like that. But now that you mention it and you brought this forward, it does kind of seem plausible that she would die younger. You know, but the question remains: what was she involved in drugs recently, and what types of drugs?
Well, that doesn't, you know, even if she wasn't taking them recently, the impact, you know, the effect they can have on your internal organs over decades, because, you know, it is public information that she took them for a long time. You know, while she was making Star Wars, you know, she was off her head at times. So, do you think that it's and of course she's also had I mean, she's had some mental problems over time, you know.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
how much do you know about her? It sounds like you don't
I
know
had
anything
no
about her.
idea she had mental problems, dude. I wasn't a huge follower of her. I just know her from the Star Wars movies. I had no idea she had mental issues, though.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember, but I mean, she's certainly had a depression problem, but she may have been bipolar, but I can't remember. You know, but either way, you know, people have used drugs, and it has knackered up their bodies, and of course they don't last as long. You know, it has an impact on the heart, and you know, and on the liver. Drinking has given impacts on the liver. You know, now she's died of a heart attack. Effectively, she had a heart attack. I don't know whether she was in a coma or whatever. That, as far as I'm aware, that information hasn't been released. But you know, she had a heart attack on a plane. She was in hospital. She seemed to be getting a little bit better. She was stable, and then there was a turn for the worse, and she died.
Wow.
You know, now this happens to people all the time. Just because her name's Carrie Fisher and she's famous, you know, it doesn't make any difference to, you know, someone who's a human being and took drugs when she was younger and has had issues with drinking as well, you know, and that, like I say, that can damage your body. You know, it's the idea of, you know, imagine you've got someone who's a big fat slob for most of their life, and they, you know, they get crap in their arteries and stuff like that, you know, okay. And then what they do is they decide can't do that anymore. It's not healthy, and so they go on a diet and they eat better and things like that, and they get themselves slim, and they might be like that for 10 years, and then they die because the effect of overeating, you know, has it had an impact on their lives, you know, or even something simple as, you know, you've got someone who's a big fat heavy person and putting all that weight on your joints, something like your knees, you know, and even if they lose weight later on, they still end up having to have knee surgery because, you know, they've gone and basically put too much weight on their joints and worn them out. That they're slim now doesn't make any difference. You know, the damage was done a long time ago. So, you know, people die. People die young. You know, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right on that. You know, we've seen this with the deaths of other celebrities like Michael Jackson, other people who died at young ages. Whitney Houston, of course.
Yeah.
You know, those types of people, and what it more so than anything, it makes you put in perspective, you know, the whole entertainment industry to begin with, you know, and the stuff that these people put themselves through, types of lifestyles they live when they are famous, you know.
Mm-hmm. You know, so I think it's a fallacy to you know, ascribe special meaning in Carrie Fisher dying. You know, because the information that she had an affair with Harrison Ford, well, you know, let's not forget that there's two parties involved in that. It's not just her, it's him as well. And so, you know, it's like eventually he must have known it would come out at some point or other.
You're right on that. And I want to go ahead and let's go ahead and move on. Perhaps you can come back to this later. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next article here. Let me go ahead and post a link, and I'll go ahead and read it, and we can talk about it. All right. I might as well share the. Why not share the screen? All right. Oh wow. Where is that? You guys can see this, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. China just gave Trump a 999-foot-long middle finger. All right. China sent President-elect Trump a not-so-subtle signal on Monday when its first aircraft carrier, accompanied by 5 warships, sailed in disputed waters of the South China Sea. The implicit message from Beijing was, "We are not cowed by your tough talk." All right, the Liaoning, a 999-foot retrofitted aircraft carrier sailed past islands controlled by Taiwan, which has become a flashpoint in emerging relations between China and Trump since he took a congratulatory post-election call from Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen. That was the first direct contact between an American president and the leader of Taiwan since 1971, and it called into question the future of the One China policy that has been a bedrock of Washington-Beijing relations for decades. More recently, Trump took China to task for seizing a U.S. submersible drone in international waters near the Philippines on December 15th. All right, after objections from the Obama administration, the ocean monitoring drone was returned. Taking the drone was also seen sent a message to Trump. Patrick M. Cornyn, senior director of the Asia Pacific Security Program at the Center of New American Security, a Washington think tank, told the New York Times, "I see the snatched drone as a calculated act of coercive diplomacy approved at the top. I believe Beijing accelerated plans to create an early test for the new administration because Trump publicly called into question the One China policy and because China judged it safer to provoke Obama than an unpredictable Trump." All right. The New Yorker online made the case last week that Trump has taken a page from his best-selling The Art of the Deal and is being provocative with China to gain leverage. It cited the following tactic, whether conceived by Trump or his co-writer. My style of deal-making is quite simple and straightforward. I'm very high, and then I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing to get what I'm after. Sometimes I settle for less than I sought, but in most cases, I still end up with what I want. All right, writer Zhuang Fang. Those words provide a notion of Trump's self-image, and in conjunction with his Twitter tirades, a rough contour of his China strategy. All right. China may also have taken a less obvious shot across Trump's bow on December 8th when it placed restrictions on the amount of money gamblers in Macau can withdraw. Macau. All right. Thank you. Can withdraw from the ATMs of China Union Pay Company. All right. What has that got to do with Beijing's anger at the president-elect? It's complicated. All right. There are limits on how much cash mainland Chinese gamblers are allowed to take across the border to the autonomous territory of Macau, which has been called the Las Vegas of Asia. So about 50% of Chinese visitors use Union Pay ATM cards to withdraw more gambling money, according to Bloomberg. The new restrictions sent shares of U.S. gambling stocks tumbling, including Wayne Macau, which opened the $4.2 billion Wayne Palace last summer, and Las Vegas Sands Corp, LVSC, which opened the $2.9 billion Parisian Macau in September. LVSC shares dropped by 13%. Las Vegas Sands is controlled by billionaire and GOP mega donor Sheldon Adelson, who, along with his wife, Miriam, just happened to be Donald Trump's biggest campaign contributors, giving more than $20 million toward his election. Beijing almost immediately softened the restrictions, putting a cap on per transaction withdrawals and not imposing a daily limit. But the writing on the casino wall was clear. Retaliation can take many forms. All right, so what do you guys think about this?
Trump made a big mistake when he took that call because I think he's inept. He has no idea what the one China policy is. I mean, do you know what the one China policy is?
Yes, the United States recognizes China and not Taiwan.
Yeah, but the problem is that, I mean, do you understand the history of it, though?
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar with that whole history.
The Chinese nationalists and everything.
Yeah, you know, Chiang Kai-shek, Mao Zedong, you know, he
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Right. So basically, just for the audience, you've basically got in the 30s, or was it the 40s? 40, I know. Anyway, so way back, you had the emperor who ran China effectively. And he had a government that did what he wanted, or, you know, did what was in the best interest of the nation. And then the communists basically took over, but there was fighting that went on, you know, in the trying to establish it. And and Taiwan is basically run by the nationalists. They're the pro-emperor, you know, group, as opposed to the Communist Party of China. So they allow Taiwan to exist as a nation, but they don't recognize it as a nation. To use the Middle Eastern idea, Iran doesn't really recognize Israel as such. They still kind of think of it as Palestine, and they use Palestine wherever possible. So, and that's, you know, so it's the same kind of thing. So when Nixon went to China, he basically agreed that they wouldn't recognize Taiwan as a separate state from China. Now, Taiwan isn't a part of NATO. They're not a part of a union, you know, because that would upset the Chinese. So they have F-16s and all sorts of things like that. But China is much more powerful. And if Trump isn't careful, the Chinese could end up doing to Taiwan what the Russians did to Crimea. They could just invade it and take it. And that, I think that, and I think that is what is going on right now. That basically they're trying to point out, yeah, this thing that you're doing, we don't like it. Now, this thing about an aircraft carrier, they've been building this aircraft carrier for years. You know, this isn't something new, you know, that's just popped out of nowhere. They haven't just chucked it together since 18 months ago when Trump decided he was going to run for president. This is, China's on the increase, and they're trying to say, this area of the South China Sea, this is ours. They're mobilizing they're increasing their military. They're trying to become another world power. Now they already kind of are, but they're not. It's not a Cold War as such because we trade with them, but they also own a lot of America's debt and British debt for that matter. So can America afford to piss off the Chinese, because the Chinese can say, right, we want our debt now. We want our debt. We want you to pay your debts now. And what's America gonna do? You there?
I'm here. Patriarch, are you there?
Yeah, if I remember, Liaoning is the ex. What was it? It was a Russian. The Riga, I think. The Russians have got an aircraft carrier called the Admiral Kuznetsov. Kuznetsov. They've actually been using it on rebels and ISIS in Syria. It's off the coast right now, fitted with flanker Ks, I think it is, and Su-33 flanker Ks, and MiG-29Ks as well. These are the navalized variant with wingtips that fold in and things like that. But the Chinese, the Russians built two, and the Chinese bought one, and they basically done it up. But it was stripped back. It was stripped down.
Wow.
And this was transferred to China in mid-2000. So it's taken a long time to put this thing together. Wow. I'm just reading. It took quite a trip. Apparently, the Suez Canal doesn't allow dead ships on tow to pass through the canal. So they had to take it all the way out it started off at the Russian port of Sevastopol on the Black Sea, was taken through the Bosphorus, which is the river on either side of Istanbul. Istanbul is on either side of it, so it's right through the middle of Turkey. And then it was taken out into the Med, and then it was taken all the way across the Med, out through the Strait of Gibraltar, which is the bottom of Spain, and then it's had to be taken all the way around, all the way around the bottom of Africa, and up. Straits of Malacca, 6 miles an hour. picked up surprise at Piraeus in Greece, Las Palmas in the Canary Islands, Maputo, Mozambique, and Singapore into Chinese waters 2002. Like I say, China's on the is growing militarily. You know, they're even building stealth fighters now. A couple were on display at the Beijing Air Show or something recently. There's a biennial air show that the Chinese have to show off their arms and try and generate some money for the Chinese arms trade. Try and get some contracts to build some Chinese jet fighters and things like that. But they've just it's in here because it's in my latest Air Forces Monthly magazine. Yeah, that is. Air Show China 2016. Where basically their aerospace industry, to show off its technological expertise. And the Chengdu J20 made its public display. Kicked off with a top secret Chengdu J20 making its public debut at the opening day ceremony, showing the world and the military dignitaries present what it can do. Two of these futuristic-looking jets made a formation flyby before one broke away and put on a display which lasted only a minute, short but sweet. The J20 has been shrouded in secrecy, while the prototypes made their first flight in January 2011. And there are believed to be 18 flying, 7 prototypes, and 11 low-rate initial production. But there's no drip of the press releases and briefings like the F-35 Lightning II, the West's 5th generation fighter it's emulating. This new aircraft carrier that the Chinese have got now, they'll be flying the knockoff of the Russian flanker, Su-27 type flanker, the Shenyang J-11, and it'll be a carrier variant of it. By the way, Christopher, who is Patriarch? Because you used a different name with him before.
Oh. I don't know if he's here or not. You don't recognize his voice at all?
I don't know because I don't. I've only had a limited range of people I've spoken to.
Well, it's incorporated.
Incorporated. I recognize the name, but I don't remember the character. If that makes sense.
Incorporated boy.
Vaguely.
Don't
remember ever having a conversation with him, to be honest. So, is he a conspiracy theorist or something? Because
no, but he's kind of Afrocentric.
Sorry.
So he kind of has sort of Afrocentric views.
Oh right, okay.
So how did you spend your Christmas?
I went to my parents. I have watched no Christmas television at all. I've caught up on stuff that I've been meaning to catch up on. But no, on Christmas Day, I went down to my parents. I gave and received some gifts. We had Christmas dinner. We chatted about stuff. We had a laugh. You know, it was good. It was a really good day. Reminiscing about the past and about who we are and, you know, why we're a family, why we appreciate each other. You know, definitely gave, you know, that sort of family bond. It reinforced that family bond for me. You know, I'm fortunate that you know, my family aren't a raging bunch of arseholes. That's not to say that we agree on everything. Although my mum does agree that Donald Trump is just a stupid ass. Yeah, for Christmas, I gave my dad a bottle of scotch, some Glenmorangie. I got my brother the Blu-ray, 4 Blu-ray movies from, you know, the Aliens anthology. There's an Aliens, Alien Resurrection, Alien 3. So he was really like that. And I also bought him Akira, the Japanese anime that brought anime to the West. I also, and for my mum, she likes knitting, so I bought her a cardigan pattern and the wool to make it. And she said that was the best present I've ever got her, so that's especially gratifying. How about you?
My brother came home for the holidays because he's in the Marines
All right, yeah.
currently and still undergoing training.
Mm.
So yeah, we're kind of tight on money, so only got to get 2 games, which is not so bad, but at least I got something.
Hmm.
And just it was good, kind of. Hopefully next year will be better because so much shit. Besides school, it's just problems I face at home.
Uh-huh.
Not from my family, but from some of our guests,
All right.
which has been kind of stressful.
Yeah. Christmas is very stressful for many people. As I said, I'm fortunate. It's not so bad for me. The presents I got were largely clothes from my parents, and my as you can see from my avatar, I like Transformers, the robots turn to cars and planes and stuff. He bought me a big book showing the history of it all, from the sort of the old toys from the 70s from Takara, which Hasbro used to launch Transformers. And sort of they did it in concert with cartoons, and then when that all finished in the UK, and the comics as well, that was a big part of it. And then and then there was the movie, and then they stopped doing the cartoon, and comics still continued. The American comics stopped, but the British finished it off because it was done in a different format in the UK. So in America, it was a monthly magazine. In Britain, it was a weekly, originally fortnightly, but then weekly magazine, comic. And then, but obviously, the Americans aren't supplying that much. So the British Marvel UK were providing their own stories and fleshing out characters and things like that. And so the US comic finished at issue number 80, whereas the UK one was 332. And the way it would work would be, you might have maybe a 2-part American story that would appear in the UK in consecutive issues, and then there would be 6 weeks worth of other stuff before another 2 or 3 American stories would pop in, and then you would go back to UK stuff and so on. So yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed that comic. My favorite thing when I was a kid. Transformers and Lego, those were my toys.
Yeah.
I had Star Wars toys earlier on. I'm 42 years old, so obviously there's a generation shift.
Ever hear about Bionicles?
Bionicles, yeah, vaguely.
Yeah, that was my shit back in the day. I used to build a lot of Bionicles when I was younger.
Right. Oh, yeah, the Lego thing. Yeah, I know what you mean now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they kind of discontinued that, which is kind of sucks, because they should have kept on going with that shit, because I think they were kind of popular to a certain extent.
Yeah. The anyway, so then the cartoon finished, the comics continued, and then Marvel tried relaunching as Generation 2. So they made some new toys and brought out some old ones in new colors, and then and they had a comic to go with it, and then that eventually became Beast Wars,
Oh yeah,
and then that turned into Armada or whatever, and
yeah.
then we've
That's
got the current
right.
movies.
Yeah, Armada is the one I start out with. I remember, like, I would go back and try and find like Beast Wars that seemed interesting,
Mm,
and then I saw Energon. That was the next one,
right.
and then they had Cybertron, which was
Mm,
also interesting. I liked the final episode when Optimus Prime and Galvatron, who is Megatron, basically
yeah.
been like evolved kind of.
Oh yeah, I
And
know. I
because
know
in that
Galvatron is.
series, he had Unicron. I don't know if you know about Unicron, basically the proverbial like Satanesque figure, the
Yeah,
antithesis to Primus.
yeah. The problem is I don't know. I don't know those cartoons, but I do know the British one from which they're founded. So I don't know if they follow it exactly or whether because the history, the fluff, the story around it was that you basically had Primus, who created the Transformers as a defense against Unicron once, coming back, kind of thing. And unfortunately, his creation split in two and was the Autobots and Decepticons. Have you ever seen Transformers the movie from 1986?
1986 now.
It's worth watching. It's been remastered on Blu-ray, or at least it's going to be. I don't know which. And that, at the time, it was, unusual for a kids' cartoon because it had some of the big name stars of the time. If you've ever heard of the Brat Pack in the 80s, Judd Nelson was the voice of Hot Rod. Leonard Nimoy plays Galvatron.
Oh.
So Megatron gets turned into Galvatron by Unicron. And you had like Robert Stack. Orson Welles does the voice of Unicron, and that in itself is interesting because he did the voice. They had to do a lot of editing on it because he didn't sound very good, and that's because he died 2 days after doing his audio.
Oh shit!
I mean, it's almost sad, really, because you've got Orson Welles, who has a real history in movies, and the last thing he did was the voiceover artist for some toy cartoon about toys, some kids cartoon. I know that sounds demeaning, but you got the guy that starred in Citizen Kane, one of the biggest movies of all time, certainly of the era, and the last job that he does is the voiceover artist for a cartoon. Nowadays, it's seen as something cool, but back then it wasn't really. But Robert Stack, who was a big name in the 50s, he did the voice of Ultra Magnus. So yeah, but it was a really good story. Worth watching if you haven't seen it. Download it.
Yeah.
But Transformers movie 1986. The amusing thing about it is my favorite story came out 30 years ago in 2016, 30 years ago. It's it's a little bit like it's got a little bit of Back to the Future in it. In Transformers the movie, so Megatron tries attacking the Autobot base on Earth. He kind of gets his ass kicked to him. Optimus Prime dies. And Megatron is mortally wounded. And they're on the space shuttle, Astro Train, flying back to Cybertron. And Astro Train says he can't make it with all the weight in him. So they kick out a bunch of Decepticons into space, including Megatron. And this is done by Starscream, who'd always been trying to steal leadership. In fact, one of the reasons I think that Megatron kept him around was as a punching bag. You know, don't get out of line or you'll get what Starscream gets. You know. So so Unicron is flying through space as a big he's a giant robot who turns in who is a planet, and it goes around eating other planets to sustain energy for itself, you know. And so it's flying around, and he comes across Megatron, and he gives him a choice: serve him or die. Just continue into oblivion, you know, floating in space, weak, dying, you know. And he rebuilds him into Galvatron, and the other Decepticons that have been thrown out of the spaceship as well, they get turned into Cyclonus and Scourge and the Sweeps and, you know, his henchmen. And so they go to Cybertron, and Starscream gets killed, you know, by Galvatron, and he steals the power. And Unicron, as a part of the serving, is to destroy the Creation Matrix, which is a kind of thing that sits in the chest of Optimus Prime and the leaders. Yeah. And when Optimus Prime died, he handed it to Ultra Magnus. And so he takes the Decepticon, goes after Ultra Magnus, and the Dinobots, but they get separated. That bit isn't really that important, but you know, there's a part two, you know, a second act. But so Ultra Magnus is destroyed, and the Galvatron takes the Matrix. But he goes to Galvatron, and rather than be a servant, he tries to use it to control Unicron. But he can't open it. He just can't open it. And Unicron transforms into this big robot and starts attacking Cybertron, literally trying to tear holes in it. And Galvatron tries shooting him, and Unicron just picks him up and swallows him. Well, in the meantime, or just before that, Ultra Magnus is repaired, and they go trying to get it back, you know, get the Matrix back, and they go to Cybertron, and it's being attacked. So they crash into Unicron and and they get inside Unicron, and they get separated, and Hot Rod bumps into Galvatron, and he's being choked and being killed. He's been destroyed. And he touches the Matrix, which is like on a chain around Galvatron's neck. And when he does, he's energized, and he then gets turned into Rodimus Prime. So the new leader, you know, he's made bigger and stronger, and he grabs hold of Galvatron and he throws him out of Unicron's leg into space. And then he uses the Matrix and blows up Unicron from the inside, and all you end up with is Unicron's head spinning like a moon around Cybertron. So that's the general story. Well, in my favorite story, comic story, Target 2006, so it's the year 1986, Optimus Prime, Prowl, and Ratchet are giving a briefing when suddenly they just start screaming, and they start sort of phasing out, and suddenly poof, there's an explosion and they're just gone. And somewhere like Wyoming, I think it was, somewhere else in America, 3 Decepticons pop out into existence. And this is Galvatron, Cyclonus, and Scourge. And so they go to Megatron and they ask to borrow the Constructicons. Megatron says no. And in a part of the a part of the scuffle, Galvatron stops Cyclonus, I think it was, from attacking Megatron, because remember, Galvatron is Megatron, or Megatron is Galvatron, rather, becomes Galvatron. So what he does is he buries them under a load of rock, and knocks them out basically, and takes the Constructicons anyway. So elsewhere, so the Autobots, the 80s Autobots, because remember, it's 2006 when the where Galvatron, Cyclonus, and Scourge are from. So they've gone back in time. So the Autobots go looking to, there's Optimus Prime, Prowl, and Ratchet have just vanished and exploded into nothing. There's no sign of them at all. Nothing more than a bit of dust where they stood, and even then, it's not enough dust to be their bodies, as it were. So there's only one of the people that might be responsible for this: the Decepticons. So they go and they find Galvatron, Cyclonus, and Scourge, who basically kick their ass because they're much more powerful and stronger, because they've been rebuilt in the mid 2000s, and they get beaten. And so at the same time, on Cybertron, there's a project to destroy, to take out. There's this elite group called the Wreckers, and they're some of the toughest Autobots around. They're a crack team. They're like the Navy SEALs or the SAS or something like that of the Autobot world. And so the plan is to take out some of the most deadliest Decepticon killers. And Emirate Sauron, who is the Autobot leader on Cybertron, he's the bait. Well, Ultra Magnus is on Cybertron, and he is a part of the project. He's to hold the Decepticons at bay in a tunnel, while the reinforcements at bay in a tunnel, while the rest of the Wreckers do the deed, take out these Decepticon killers. So, but they get message that that Optimus Prime is gone, so they send him back to Earth. and he comes across Cyclonus and Hound, who's been taking a little reconnaissance look, and Hound gets his ass kicked, but Ultra Magnus saves him and runs away. So Ultra Magnus goes back to the Autobots and gets told what's going on, and the Autobots decide to have a second crack, and he hasn't got time to help them. He's got other stuff, he's got to look into what's happened to Optimus Prime, because that's more important. And not only that, he's on the clock, because he needs to get back to Cybertron to take part in this thing that's going on. So the Autobots go along and have another second crack, and it doesn't really work. But Galvatron leaves and takes the Constructicons. It in the end, trying to remember his name now. He's a red van. Ironhide. Ironhide digs out Megatron in this Better the Devil You Know. So the plan is to get, the Megatron and the Autobots to deal with Galvatron and get some, and in the fighting, in the second attempt, Galvatron manages to keep hold of Jazz. But anyway, it's a longer story. I'm getting into too much information here. So later in the thing, so Jazz is being held a prisoner, and he's saying, "You're just like him. You're just like Megatron," and he reveals that he's not just like Megatron. He is Megatron. So elsewhere, 3 new Autobots pop into existence: Hot Rod, Cup, and Blur. And they find Ultra Magnus, and what's that?
I don't mean to interrupt you.
I'm boring, aren't I?
But I wanted to get to a few more news stories.
Oh, you're back. Sorry, I was talking while you were away.
To see if anybody else want to talk about. All right. So here's another one. Obama issues sanctions for alleged Russian hacking. All right, interesting. This is from Yahoo.com. I'll go ahead and post the link to it. Okay. President Obama has expelled 35 Russian nationals and sanctioned 5 Russian entities and 4 individuals for an alleged cyber assault on democratic political organizations during the 2016 presidential campaign, the White House announced today. I have ordered a number of actions in response to the Russian government's aggressive harassment of U.S. officials and cyber operations aimed at the U.S. election, Obama wrote in a statement. These actions follow repeated private and public warnings that we have issued to the Russian government and are a necessary and appropriate response to efforts to harm U.S. interests in violation of established international norms of behavior. Obama noted that all Americans should be alarmed by Russia's actions, which were designed to interfere with the U.S. election process. These data theft and disclosure activities could only have been directed by the highest levels of the Russian government, Obama said. Moreover, our diplomats have experienced an unacceptable level of harassment in Moscow by Russian security services and police over the last year. Such activities have consequences. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the sanctions are intended to spoil U.S. relations with Russia and undermine the incoming Trump administration, according to Russian news agency Interfax. Obama issued an executive order amending his April 2015 decree to expand authorization for a response to certain cyber activity that seeks to interfere with or undermine U.S. election processes and institutions. All right.
Yeah, you see, the problem is, the administration is under a great deal of. They have a tough problem because there's bound to be evidence that they've obtained, and they keep saying the same thing, that both the CIA and the FBI have said, yeah, there's something going on here, there's something to this, but people are saying, oh, you should show your evidence for this. The problem is they probably can't show their evidence because that would then alert everybody to how they're gathering this intelligence. I mean, for example, what happens if they have the ability to do it, but they're having to break the law to do it? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's use a practical example. Let's say that let's just hypothesize that there are laws saying that private citizens can't be spied upon digitally unless there's a warrant to do so. But someone, but thanks to the ability that they've got and they haven't been telling people, they've got the evidence already. Can they use it?
Yeah, but this also is intriguing. In the article, it says Obama said that the State Department is also shutting down 2 Russian compounds in Maryland and New York used by Russian personnel for intelligence-related purposes, and has ordered 35 Russian intelligence operatives to leave the U.S. within 72 hours. So, I mean, Russia has known compounds on American soil where they're conducting intelligence, and I mean, have they been allowed to do this, or were these compounds like the places that they've just found? And I mean,
okay. Are you familiar with how embassies work?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got the embassy, but they can also hire outbuildings and other but the officials that work in these buildings, these compounds, are protected by diplomatic immunity. Now, governments can say, we don't want those people here, because when it comes down to it, the ambassador to a country has to get permission from the country to be an ambassador in that country. Does that make sense? So the Russian ambassador has to get permission from America to have to be the ambassador and be to have an embassy and things like that. We in the UK, the North Korean embassy is a house. We're not talking about some big building. We're just talking about a house. It's just some brick house that looks like some family would live there, but instead it's the North Korean embassy, and they have ambassadors and so on. But they've also got the ability to communicate secretly with their home base, to whether it be Russia or North Korea or wherever. And of course, most states are friendly ones. But if you remember, not that long ago, the Germans pointed out the Americans had spied on Angela Merkel's text messages and private messages. They gained evidence of that. Now, what is the response? Something goes down, and the Germans could say, right, we don't want these 5 people in our country. Get rid of them. You've got 72 hours to get them out of the country. We're not going to shut down the embassy, but we're going to restrict your ability to spy on us, effectively. And that's what's gone on here. That's what this is.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this goes on all the time, you know. I mean, when the Russians got involved in Syria, the British government summoned them to to appear, to come and talk to the British officials. Send your diplomat. We want to talk to them, basically. Is the equivalent of being summoned to the headmaster's office, that kind of thing. Now they could say no, but then you've got all sorts of frosty diplomatic things going on. But, normally they turn up and say what the party line is, or what the state line is, the state opinion, or whatever. And sometimes it can be, yeah, we've done that. What are you going to do about it? I mean, they'll say this in diplomatic terms. We have a right to, work in concert with another country. But they frequently get asked to explain themselves when things go on. So that's what this is.
Okay. Now are you aware of the story of the?
Give me a sec. My phone's gone off.
Okay.
All right, that's a buddy of mine. I said I'll phone him back in 20 minutes, so we got 20 minutes.
Okay. Are you familiar with I forgot his name, but I saw a BBC documentary. He's about a British spy who he ended up living in Russia in the later part of his life. But when he was younger, he was sent into Korea to infiltrate, I believe, North Korea on behalf of the British, and he ended up getting captured at some point. But then he ended up coming back to the UK, but then he betrayed the UK and he ended up finding asylum in Russia. Are you familiar with what his name was? Did you hear about that story?
No, I mean, I know about Philby, but I don't recognize this person in particular. I don't recognize that story.
No, all right. Well, don't worry about it. But the idea of diplomacy has always intrigued me. How do you feel about relations between the U.S. and Russia?
Well, it's kind of a difficult one because, Russia, you have to look at the history of it. It's important to recognize the history of it. So, World War II, the Germans walk right in from Poland because they seized Poland. They walked straight into Russia. They got all the way to Leningrad, and the fighting was going on and things like that. And it became a stalemate basically. And then the Russians, literally fighting. The Russians fought very, very well. I mean, they didn't have enough guns for the people, the fighters. So what they would do is they'd give one man a gun and one man the bullets. And so when one man got killed because they were rushing in, the other guy would pick up the gun or the bullets, and that then be able to be in a position, because they knew half of them would get killed getting there, getting to the end point that they were trying to get to, by which time, at least you haven't got a load of people with guns in their hands and not being able to use them because they're dead. So, anyway, so what happened was eventually the Russians won against the Germans on that regard. And the Germans ended up being defeated by the Allies, which included Russia. Well, post World War II, the Russians decided that they didn't want this kind of thing happening again, another nation just walking right into their country. So what they did was they created a buffer zone of friendly countries, Russian-friendly countries. So it's, Latvia and Bulgaria and Romania and Czechoslovakia, and Poland and things like that. And these were the Warsaw Pact, so they were part of the Soviet Union. So, well, what happens is, goes back to the the 80s into the early 90s, and communism falls to bits. Basically, they didn't have the resources to fund the Cold War anymore, and so the Union collapsed. So now you've got all these, I think the best way to describe them would be second world nations. So you've got Bulgaria and Latvia and Romania and things like that. These are second world nations. They still had a lot of people in poverty. The amount of expertise is limited compared to the West, compared to Britain and France and Germany and America and things like that. So what happens is Russia hasn't got enough money to keep their own military going. And they haven't, they're kind of friendly, but, effectively, Russia's got no money. So do we have economic trade with Russia, or do we have economic trade with the people who got the money in Europe? So they start to lean towards Europe. And gradually, as all these ex-Soviet nations kind of convert to Europeanism, so to speak, they join NATO as well. And so Russia can see NATO getting closer and closer and closer. Well, by this time, we're talking about the late 90s into the 2000s. Russia's now in a much more financially secure position. They've got oil and gas, which they build pipelines and they send it to Europe. But equally, you've also got the space shuttle that has stopped flying. And so the only way you can get to the ISS right now is with the Russians' help, because they helped fund and build the ISS, because they had the expertise, thanks to Mir, to build the thing, to have a space station that was up there for years and years, So it was a union. It was a common interest. America and Russia working together in a space program to build to put the ISS together along with other nations, and build the things and launch rockets and launch supplies and things like that. This is why what was it called? SpaceX is so important, because they can deliver supplies, but they can't deliver astronauts yet because it's not quite safe. It's not quite reliable enough to stick people on it yet. But anyway, so Russia is now starting to flex its might. It's trying to say, we're worried about this creeping thing that's going on. I mean, a prime example is, do you know why the Russians got involved in Syria?
Well, I mean, I've heard many different theories and stuff, and there's a lot of different theories. I believe it was to.
Can you think of one?
They want to ally in the Middle East, right? Strategic ally, right?
But why?
I would assume for resources, stuff like oil, stuff like.
No, they've already got loads of that.
Well, that's what there's a lot of different theories.
Okay, I'll tell you the reality. So it all comes down to the Crimea. Okay, now the reason why the Russians took Crimea was because I'll show you on Google Earth. Okay, so if you look at Russia, so this big chunk up here, okay, let's rotate it around a bit. Okay, so Moscow's down over here. So if you look at Russia, most of it is in the north. Most of their seaports are up in the north. And what happens is, through the winter, they get frozen in. They have icebreakers so they can actually get out into the ocean. And the only other thing they've got like Vladivostok down here somewhere. So what they do is they've so they had during the Cold War period, they had if you look here, we've got the Ukraine, and a part of Ukraine is this bit here, all the way from, you know, this chunk here. This is the Crimean Peninsula. So, and what they have is Sevastopol. And this is where the Black Sea, the Russian Black Sea Fleet is based. So, and this has been around for, you know, for decades. Well, the Ukraine is another one of those countries that was leaning towards the left, leaning towards Europe. And, you know, a new president was voted in who was pro-Eastern, but there was a coup and he got toppled. One of the suggestions is that he tried to have the rival guy poisoned. But anyway, so so suddenly there's a coup, and the Ukraine is leaning left again. They're looking towards, you know, Europe. And the Russians panicked, effectively. They were worried because if they, the Ukraine becomes a part of NATO, suddenly Sevastopol is a closed port for them. They can't use it anymore. They'll have to find somewhere else. And, you know, they need a warm water port. So, but more than that, the only way out of the Black Sea is through the Bosphorus here, right through the middle of Turkey. Okay, Turkey is a NATO country. So what they've done now, in the 1970s, they had two ports on the Mediterranean. One of them was in Egypt. The other one was in Syria at Latakia. And, well, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they didn't have the money and resources to keep the port open, so they gave it up. And, you know, as double security, because, like I say, all Turkey has to do is to shut the Bosphorus down to Russian naval vessels, and suddenly they can't do anything. They're stuck in the Black Sea, and they can't even get out into the Med, and even through the Suez Canal out into you know. So they're kind of stuck. So by having a deal with Syria, and it has two advantages. First of all, they get a warm water port, excellent. And secondly, Syria is an aging force in the Middle East. So, you know, most of their military aircraft are from the 70s and 80s. And they're getting old. And of course, you know, if you want to buy new equipment, where are you going to buy it from? Well, we've got the Russians who've helped us. We should buy Russian stuff. So it's a good deal. It keeps Russian aircraft manufacturing jobs, you know, safe, because most people are buying American or British or whatever, you know, or French. So it gives them a supply. And the same applied to Iraq. The reason why Iraq and France vetoed vetoed action against Saddam was because you know, they had been selling military hardware to them for decades. So it's a similar kind of deal. And of course, the third one, and it's a tertiary usefulness, is that all these air raids that are going on against you know, Syrian rebels from the Syrian point of view, it gives air crews training experience. They've got live action experience. They've actually taken part in live weapon drops. So it gives them, you know, the experience that they don't often get. You know, because if you look at the last, you know, decade or so, America and Europe have got loads of experience. I mean, in the 80s, the amount of actual Air Force veterans that had seen action were few and far between, because a lot of the people from Vietnam had retired by then. So there weren't that many of them. Now we have loads of people that have seen combat. Now the big danger right now is if a war hots up between Russia and America, or the West and NATO, then this is a different kind of war, because the stuff that's been going on against Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and things like that, well, they're not in a position to put up much of a fight. They haven't got a proper air force that can really counter NATO. And they haven't got anti-aircraft missile systems that can counter NATO in the same way. So whereas against the Russians or the Chinese, maintaining air superiority is going to be a much harder prospect. Because Russia, they may not have as much training, but they're not a pushover. It would be a mistake to consider them a has-been. They've spent the last decade building up their military. So what's going on right now is Russia is flexing their muscle. America is saying, be careful here. But Trump has business interests in Russia. He has family connections through his wife to that part of the world as well. So he has to be really careful not to piss off the Russians, because next thing you know, they're shutting the Trump hotel in Moscow, or I don't even know if there is one, but let's say there is one. But his business interests end up being damaged. And that is probably more important to Trump than diplomatic relationships with America. Now with China, he doesn't have quite the same amount of interest, personal financial interest. So it's a much different relationship. So he can rattle the swords a little bit more, and not have as many consequences. But that's not really much help to Taiwan, who could be invaded and crushed.
Okay. Understood. Yeah, this whole Russian situation is one of great interest to me. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But I know one of Russia's biggest aims, I believe, is to get the Crimea and then Black Sea. They want to station their navy in that area. They want to be able to project their navy from that area, right? Because I think historically they could only put.
Yeah, I just told you that. They've been projecting their navy. They've had a navy there since the 40s.
Yeah, but I guess I don't know. But I mean, I think their navy is it's still very small and small though, right?
Well, it's small, but it's capable. I mean, the Russians don't have aircraft carriers. They've got one. And it's an old one, and it's not a very good one either. It's pretty small as well, But that's not the way Russians do things anyway. They have long range bombers to achieve similar things. Their interests are rather more insular, so they protect their own areas. So it would, as I said before, it would be dangerous to you can't really compare them. Yes, America has a larger military, but you have to remember that there's the special guns that are out there, nuclear weapons. If Russia gets threatened enough, it's kind of like the dog You know, if you make them scared enough, they might attack. You know, you piss off Russia enough. You know, what's to stop some generals deciding, hey, we should do, you know, a preemptive strike and start off a nuclear war?
Right.
You know, that would be disastrous. Now, I don't think
I heard they came really close to doing that during the Cuban Missile Crisis. One of the Russian subs almost launched its nukes, but I guess somehow the crew or one of the officers convinced the captain not to do it, I guess. But we came really close before with them.
Well, we came very close in 1983 as well. Basically, an exercise, you know, in Europe, you know, looked to the Russians like, you know, preparing for war. And the Russians were very, very close to pushing the button. But,
wow,
you know, they took a step back and said, okay, maybe this is just an exercise after all. You know, and so that was when the red phone ended up being put in Moscow and the White House, so that, you know, if it ever came down to such an issue, that they could talk to each other.
You know? Okay.
But I mean, the Cuban Missile Crisis is a much different thing. I mean, have you actually looked into it?
Oh yeah, I've done some research.
Okay, are you familiar with Castro and you know, America snubbing him?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so the reason why they got close is because America was put a blockade around Cuba to prevent Russia putting missiles in Cuba, nuclear missiles in Cuba. And the Russians were very close to going over that blockade and starting the war effectively. You know, there's a lot of, you know, brinkmanship going on. And it got very close. But in the end, backroom deals were done. Because the thing you have to remember is it wasn't just, you know, Russia putting missiles in Cuba, a friendly state, is no different than America having Pershing missiles in Turkey, right next to Russia. And the Russians were threatened by this, understandably. And so they decided to do the same thing with Cuba. Okay, if you know, if America's going to have missiles right on our doorstep, we'll have missiles right on their doorstep. And America tried saying, no, you can't do that. And Russia said, try and stop us. And America did try and stop them with a blockade. You know, it got very close. And like I say, the brinkmanship was going up and up. And in the end, it was Bobby Kennedy who basically talked, you know, to the Russians on the phone, or no, not on the phone. Sorry, it was by cable, and in the end, they hammered out an agreement that the Russians would not put missiles in Cuba if you know, sorry. And the Americans would remove missiles from Turkey 6 months later. So it didn't look like they were connected. And that's how that didn't happen.
Yeah. Very interesting. You know, that whole story is very interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, I said I was going to phone my friend, so I'm going to take off.
All right, but thank you. You have a good one.
Yeah, okay, you too. Bye-bye.
All right. And I guess that's going to conclude the broadcast for today, folks. Unless someone else wants to join. Yeah, if someone else wants to join. Let me go ahead and give them the link. Hopefully these people aren't trolls. We'll see what happens when they join. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and end the broadcast. We don't get more people. All right, the link is in the side chat.
Calling from Springfield. I got a